Now, the situation in Jammu and Kashmir was peculiar for a number of reasons, and one of them was the fact, of course, that they were a border state, but also that they were themselves under attack at that time. So they had a desire to extend the period of alignment with the rest of India in terms of the application of laws, and the Constituent Assembly recognized that they were a very special case at that point of time. But there was then a big debate. So which parts of the Constitution do you accept, and at what length of time would that take place? So this was not a simple decision. There was a lot of negotiation on it. There's a lot of correspondence on it, and all of this is actually archival material today. Now, to cut a long story short, what happened at that time was that to accommodate them, the only temporary article of the Constitution was drafted. Okay, I underline this: the only temporary article. This was what today we call Article 370. At that point, it was numbered Article 306A. Now, immediately after that article the Constitution was adopted, you had a series of presidential proclamations under that article, which started aligning the state. Okay. In the last 70 years, you had 54 of these presidential proclamations. But here's what went wrong. The presidential proclamations were very rapid in the initial years, but as there was a climate of intimidation and separatism in Kashmir, they started to dry up. They started to dry up because the state politics was now, people found that there was an arbitraging possibility using the separate, the 370 article, because 370 essentially mandated, one of the consequences of 370 was you had local ownership of property. You had, which was a provision of another provision of the Constitution called 35A, and there were restrictions in many ways of what would be normal economic activity in the state. Over a period of time, you had really three consequences. Number one, you didn't have the economic activity and economic energy in Kashmir, in Jammu and Kashmir, that you had in the rest of India, which meant less jobs, less job opportunities, more sense of alienation, a sense of separatism, and therefore a climate for terrorism from across the border. The second was that the state was, in socio-economic terms, increasingly less aligned with India. So if you look at all the progressive legislation of India, they did not apply to Kashmir, because whenever you drafted a law in India, pretty much, clause 2 or clause 3 of that law would say, but this law is not applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So what you had was, you didn't have right to work, you didn't have right to education, you didn't have right to information, you did not have affirmative action, you did not have the law against domestic violence, you didn't have law on representation of women in local bodies, you didn't have equal, property laws between men and women, you didn't have juvenile protection law. So I can cite to you at least about 100 important laws which did not apply to Jammu and Kashmir. Now, one was a political consequence, this economic consequence. The second was a social consequence. But 1 and 2 really led to 3, and that was a political consequence. Because what all of this it did was, it allowed really a sort of a narrow elite to arbitrage this 370, to monopolize political power, to create a sort of a closed loop politics, and they had a vested interest in keeping alive separatist sentiment. And you had actually a situation where separatist political parties were openly allied with terrorist groups operating out of Pakistan.